Throughout the Metal Gear series' long history with technology, many different forms of AIs have appeared, from the simple-minded AI weapons of the 70s to the more complex AI systems of the Patriots. But the series never really stopped to cover if you can program an AI with free will. Not just something to mimic another person's mentality, but a logical complexity that asks if given the freedom to change their directive, would they? Though it is this question about one's freedom that is the underlining story arc for the beast-like, bulky, bladed, brilliant breakthrough Bow Wow buddy, Blade Wolf, also known as
LQ-84I, a prototype UG with a conversational interface.
Blade Wolf is an antagonist-turned-companion who assists Raiden throughout the events of Revengeance, and was originally known as the interface prototype for the LQ-84 Fenrir UGs. But, due to his unique learning AI, Blade Wolf was capable of human-like thought, allowing him to surpass his cybernetic counterparts, and even rival some of his actual human allies. Though, even with his vast intellect, Blade Wolf's freedom was shackled by his superiors, and he was unable to really choose for himself, until he met the man who would give him his freedom. Though, before we discuss that too deeply, let's understand the meaning behind Blade Wolf's name and design. Now, Blade Wolf's name isn't all that complex, especially compared to others in the Metal Gear series, as it seems to be chosen as a play on his UG's own design origin, that being Crying Wolf, more specifically her beast form. As Crying Wolf and Blade Wolf share a naming theme, where you select the most defining features about a character and place it before the word wolf. Now, the wolf part seems clearly selected because he is a dog-shaped robot buddy. I don't think I really need to explain that, though the reason Platinum Games did choose to make a canine companion for Rising was so that they could fully realize concept art created for a previous title, Vanquish, where it would appear that you were originally going to have a canine-like robot buddy that would be able to act as active cover for the player when you need him. Though, also, funny enough, a majority of the blades found on Blade Wolf's design were added by Platinum Games during development. And honestly, all the better, because Blade Wolf's design is fantastic, and I think Funny West puts it best when she said,
"You look like how the word Powerther sounds."
Though, more interesting than Blade Wolf's name is actually the name of his UG typing, which is original to Rising as well, that being LQ-84 Fenrir's. Firstly, we have the letter L and Q, which have no equivalent in Japanese, though are likely chosen in reference to LQ in military terms, meaning limited quantity, which could be referencing the purpose of the LQ-84I models, which were meant to replace human soldiers on the battlefield, but not many were made. Then we have the 84 in his name, which can be read as a Japanese number pun for lethal or fatal, which of course is a reference to their purpose as weapons. Then of course we have the Fenrir part of his name, which is of course in reference to the monstrous wolf of Norse mythology, whose story fits the themes of Blade Wolf pretty well, as Fenrir was born with immense strength, but he was bound by chains called Galapnir made out of things that didn't exist, because the people feared what he would become, and this gave the wolf no chance at life and crafted him into the sun-eating, god-devouring beast of Ragnarok he was always fated to be. In a similar vein, Blade Wolf was originally bound by his prime directive 0, which is to store and back up all memories and data retrieved during a mission, which is a directive that would later be used by Desperado to essentially chain him down and follow their commands. Though the reason memories are so important to Blade Wolf is because he was part of an experimental batch of LQ-84s, called the LQ-84Is. This was a series of LQ-84s that were to be fitted with an experimental AI, but due to the project being shut down, Blade Wolf was the only one completed, being a one-of-a-kind UG. He has an AI unlike any ever seen before, and how this AI was designed was it was fit with 90 billion optical neurons, which is about 56 times the normal LQ-84 model, which only has 1.6 billion neurons, and about 4 billion more than the average human brain, which sits at about 86 billion neurons. This allows Blade Wolf to essentially learn similar to that of a human. Within the first year of his life, Blade Wolf was given a variety of important building block information alongside being allowed access to near endless supplies of ebooks and website text. He soon developed a reading speed of 60 megabytes per plain text a minute, which, to put it more simply, Blade Wolf can essentially read 150,000 Word document pages in a minute. Yeah, he can read really fast. He quickly proved that they could indeed make a really intelligent AI, and in a way, this information he retained helped him form sort of an identity similar to that of a human. And because of his prime directive, he viewed these elements of himself as very important. But even after being fed multiple ideologies and using logical reason to weed out the weaker stances, Blade Wolf could never truly decide on a proper path in life. Alongside this, Blade Wolf was an utter failure of a weapon because he lacked the brutality of man, one forged by ideology. He was only ever able to kill when directly ordered to, and fought in a robotic, unrefined way. Essentially, you can imagine Blade Wolf fought only as well as books told him to fight, and no amount of training or brainwashing would work on him either. As he puts it, he possesses no killer instinct or urge to suppress it. Thus, you cannot corrupt him like you could a man. And it's this failure as a weapon that led to the LQ-84I being nothing more than a complex tool. A smart tool, but a tool nonetheless. And it's not the killing machine that the military had hoped for, so they disband the project. And Blade Wolf was left to gather dust offline in an office building. Until Desperado uncovered his body and the research attached to it, which gave their pseudo-leader Sundowner an idea. He suggested that they reactivate Blade Wolf, both because he found it funny that a machine was more compassionate for his fellow man than actual people were at the time, but also because they could train him to kill in a different way. Blade Wolf's hardware was retooled with two specific modifications, first being a remote control override chip, meaning that Desperado could set up a designated location for Blade Wolf to act in freely, but they could also take control of him at any time, and he would immediately enter their control if he were to leave the designated location. This acted as sort of a containment fence for him. Alongside that came a much more important hardware modification, this being the AI wiping unit. Essentially, if Blade Wolf refused to follow orders or actively failed his mission, Desperado could wipe his memories from a set period of time, which would essentially kill Blade Wolf's identity, targeting the only thing important to him. As if you didn't know, in Metal Gear, the body of an AI can be destroyed as much as possible, but if the AI itself is damaged, it is irreparable. It's sort of like brain damage before a computer. And this is why we can see Blade Wolf being destroyed multiple times in the canon of Metal Gear Rising, but he himself is still the same AI. Eventually, during Blade Wolf's training, he was dispatched as a guard dog for World Marshal HQ and found himself being paired up against Samuel Rodriguez, also known as Jetstream Sam. And even though Blade Wolf had the advantage of a stealth camouflage-based sneak attack, and hours of training downloaded within minutes, and being equipped with a high-frequency chainsaw, Sam overcame Blade Wolf with ease, leading Blade Wolf to wonder how he could be defeated. And Sam informs him his greatest flaw comes not from a lack of skill, but a lack of a desire to fight. As Sam chooses to fight, Blade Wolf lacks that killing intent. And this idea echoes through Blade Wolf's mind, as it's something proposed to him before they fight, which is represented best in-game by opening the boss theme up with a spicy flamenco guitar instead of the standard opening, showing that Sam has had some sort of an influence on Blade Wolf's mentality.
Should I disobey a direct order, my memory would be wiped.
Well, that's a pity.
I am sorry. You must die.
Then, I am sorry as well.
This leads Blade Wolf to consider if his lack of freedom was holding him back. The chains of World Marshal had established around him had become his own Galapnir. As, even under threat of data deletion, Blade Wolf still underperformed in simulations. He would only kill the bare minimum required to achieve his goals, and even after rigorous VR testing, Wolf showed no signs of changing. Even so, Blade Wolf would be assigned to take part in a mission in Abkhazia, alongside the Winds of Destruction Mistral and Kamsin, under the pretenses that they would be bringing freedom to the population, a concept Blade Wolf was denied but desired. And when deployed, Mistral deactivated his range inhibitor. That way he could take part in the mission without having to act as her bodyguard. But the moment it was deactivated, Blade Wolf immediately lashed out, severing one of the arms of Mistral and fleeing into the distance, which seems to be tied back to his Fenrir origins, as when binding Fenrir, the god Tyr placed his arm in Fenrir's mouth, allowing him to bite down on it and tear it off when the chains were placed around him. Blade Wolf then makes a mad dash to the beach of Abkhazia, where he comes face to face with Kamsin. Now, Kamsin acts as a great foil to Blade Wolf's character, while also being a clear parody of the Gulf War and the US-Iraq conflict, with his Wind of Destruction codename being literally Desert Storm, which if you don't know is the same codename assigned to the combat phase of the Gulf War. Alongside this, Kamsin in-universe is actually a discharged Iraq war vet, and he believes deeply in the ideals of bringing freedom to other countries through liberating them by violent force. He is essentially someone who is led blindly by the words of their superiors and never truly knew what freedom was or what he was truly doing in other places, in a similar but different way to Blade Wolf, and that's why his song, Hot Winds Blowing, which details the dehumanization of soldiers in grand conflicts and how people become tools in the pursuit of freedom, alongside how freedom has become somewhat of a reward for those who follow orders and become subservient, it matches both Khamsin's story, but also Blade Wolf's as well.
It is said all dogs have their day. You little fuck.
Though, after Khamsin is defeated and freedom is nearly within Paw's reach, those restricting chains he thought were lifted bind Blade Wolf once again, and he's forced to follow Mistral's commands, making him shake her gecko's hands like a dog would while laughing at his suffering. Eventually, Blade Wolf would surrender to his orders, and take up a role as a guard dog once again, which is a job that would lead him to facing off against the cyborg ninja, Raiden. And during their meeting, Blade Wolf boasts about his intellect, which Raiden challenges the point of a vast intellect when you can't use it for yourself, mocking his lack of freedom, and even though Blade Wolf claims this taunting did nothing, it's clear that Raiden pinched a nerve. Now, during the fight with Blade Wolf, we also hear his boss theme, I'm My Own Master Now, which plays without lyrics and matches Blade Wolf's own state of mind, as his hopes of escaping are now shattered, and he is unable to speak with his own voice, which is very different than when he fought Sam, where his feelings were ignited for the first time and the lyrics kicked in the whole fight. During his fight with Raiden, those ideas are little more than embers now. He is without a hope, and we even see this reflected in how Blade Wolf fights, constantly calling in assists, deploying troops during his first and second phase, though, when his resources are drained and he's backed into a corner, the lyrics finally kick in and reflect his suppressed mentality during this fight.
There's no choice but take orders. Attack. Don't be changed. I get fed. But the hunger's still in me. Not content to live this way. Being led by the blind.
Raiden would overwhelm Blade Wolf in a similar fashion to Sam, but leaving his body yet again in pieces while Blade Wolf contemplates the true meaning of freedom. Though, in a way that matches the desires of his song, Raiden retrieves pieces of Blade Wolf from this encounter and brings them back to Doctor, the mission's cybernetic expert. From here, they reassemble him and remove both implements that were added by Desperado, effectively giving Blade Wolf total freedom to go anywhere he wishes without the fear of data destruction. And for paying him this kindness, Blade Wolf would swear himself to assist Raiden during the World Marshal incident as a way to repay this debt. And it is this freedom that allows Blade Wolf's personality to really begin to surface, as while he is cold and calculating and a machine, it's very clear that he understands sarcasm.
Wordplay. My exoskeleton resembles a canine. Canines enjoy bones. Amusing on 2 levels.
And acts as sort of the straight man to the more flamboyant Raiden. Wolf also acts as a support for Raiden, being both reconnaissance but also keeping track of his mental health, even helping Raiden grow as a character. Along with this, we also learn that he harbors no real grudge against his former allies of Mistral and Sam, as they treated him very well during his time working with them. But he does prefer his current life now as Raiden's ally. We even see that Blade Wolf's redesign is clearly inspired by Raiden. Beyond them just having the same body structure, he was also equipped with the same visor as Raiden as well, even though he technically wouldn't need it. And the reason why Wolf and Raiden have such great chemistry is likely because they were both raised in similar ways since birth to become killing tools. Wolf sees a lot of himself in Raiden, and while Raiden thrived in the bloodshed, Wolf was unable to find purpose in it. But even then, he realizes that their different forms of expressing their trauma doesn't change that they have similar desires to help those stuck in the same position they were. Thus is why Wolf wants to help work with him to save the brains of the children harvested by World Marshal to prevent them from being twisted into weapons like they were. It is also why Blade Wolf actively volunteers to continue to help Raiden even when he doesn't have to, though this campaign against Desperado would lead Raiden, and in turn Blade Wolf, back to Jetstream Sam, where a final duel would commence and Blade Wolf would bear witness, as his 2 most trusted companions strive to take the other's life, and the purpose of which he has trouble understanding, but knew he couldn't talk either of them out of it. Though prior to the fight, Sam and Blade Wolf would have a final heart-to-heart, where Sam would entrust his legacy to the machine, and when Raiden finally cut him down, he was left in care of the Masamune as a memento of his former friend. And from here, Wolf and Raiden would reach the Solace Space and Aeronautics and meet up with Sonny Emmerich. And it's here that we see one of the best Blade Wolf scenes in the game that represents both his growth and freedom. Sonny, seeing a dog-shaped robot buddy, of course motions to shake his hand, and while Blade Wolf hesitates for a moment, likely thinking back to when Mistral forced him to do the same thing, he ultimately chooses to shake her hand, which is then followed up by a scene of Raiden requesting the same thing from him, only to have Blade Wolf reject Raiden, which, while humorous, because it causes Raiden to briefly enter Ripper mode, it also shows that Wolf has full autonomy of his actions. He no longer has to follow orders, and this is followed through in the best way during the final act of the game, as before Raiden reaches the end area, Blade Wolf is seemingly caught and beaten by Armstrong, leaving him unresponsive for most of the mission. Though after Raiden helps him and defeats Metal Gear Excelsis, which I would quick little cut in, Excelsis is not a real Metal Gear. It was given the Metal Gear title to make it sell better. That's an actual fact in the game, and it's just really funny, so anytime I bring it up, I just want to mention that. But after it's defeated, Raiden goes and confronts Armstrong, and he would soon find himself beaten and weaponless. Armstrong looks like he has taken the victory until Blade Wolf appears atop the wreckage of Excelsis with Sam's sword unlocked. And it's here to me that we see Blade Wolf prove that he can think beyond his programming. As in this situation, to oppose Armstrong means that he runs the risk of not only destruction, but total data deletion. A Blade Wolf who was thinking only with logic and completely unshackled would have retreated. He would have found a safer solution and followed his prime directive. But instead, he chooses to override that logic. His interactions with Raiden have taught him something important, and he chooses to be human and follow his emotions, throwing the sword to Raiden and ultimately assuring their victory. This moment is also coincided by the third rendition of Blade Wolf's theme. This is referred to as Passing of the Torch, which opens with a bellowing chant of freedom, much like a wolf howling at the moon.
Raiden.
Wolf.
no longer does his song require lyrics, as he no longer has a desire to escape. He's free to roam as he pleases, and eventually, after the World Marshal incident, he decides to retire with Sonny, while Raiden continues his life as a vigilante, likely because he sees Sonny as a similar person to himself, a person who needed to be saved by Raiden's actions. Blade Wolf is such an important part of Rising's story, and it would seem that his creators must have loved him as much as I do, since they gave Wolf 3 different renditions of his same boss theme, along with, if you ask me, a whole extra song within his DLC, which is something that Sam didn't get, and I believe makes him the character with the most renditions in the entire game. Though, if you didn't know, according to Kenji Saito, the director of Revengeance, Blade Wolf was originally going to just be a pilotable suit. It is unclear if he would have had the same AI story that he has now. But given how important his role as an AI is in the story, I assume that they would have some elements of that in his design, but there's no saying for sure, and I'm glad that they focused on that AI element of his story, as not only do we get to see Raiden slowly learning not to hate every AI after his experience with the Patriots, but Blade Wolf has some of my favorite interactions with Raiden because he's an AI and purports to have a superior intellect.
But wait, if you could do that all along, why'd I have to hack into that tripod back in Mexico?
I apologize. The idea did not occur to me in that situation.
Though sadly a lot of these are missable because they're optional codec conversations, but the best being the Metal Gear 2 reference where Raiden asks Wolf if he knows who Gabayama is, one of the gibberish names that the Colonel AI mentions during its breakdown.
Oh, the Colonel told me he met Gubayama once. Probably someone's name.
A significant number of sumo wrestlers use the term Yama as part of their ring name. Perhaps this Gubayama is in the sumo business.
Makes sense, sure. I just wish there was some way of knowing what that AI was trying to tell me. Don't suppose you know where Shiboniji is either, huh?
Wolf is just such a genuinely great straight man for Raiden, along with being just a perfect character for the story of Revengeance. I feel like the game would be an imperfect package without him, and that's why I love him so much. Now, if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more videos like it in the future, I have a Patreon at patreon.com/MediNotTheBadGuy. And you should also go and check out Funny Wes. Honestly, the little bit that they did with Blade Wolf and Raiden is partially the reason why I was so interested in making a Blade Wolf video. And if you're someone who is seeking freedom like no other, well, you can find the ultimate freedom within Shimoneta, a boring world where the concept of dirty jokes doesn't exist at buyshimoneta.com.